My sister's son threw my graduation cake on the floor and said, "Eat it off the ground." My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 27 years old, and this is the story of how I lost my family to save myself. It didn't happen with a big fight or a dramatic screaming match. It happened with a piece of cake, a cruel laugh, and a quiet decision I made in the dark. He shoved my graduation cake off the table. Frosting splattered across the deck, the little plastic graduation cap skittering under a chair. The candles, which I had just blown out, rolled under people's feet. My cake, the one I'd ordered for myself because I knew no one else would, was a white and blue smear on the wooden planks. Then my 10-year-old nephew, Leo, grinned a wide, toothy grin and said, "Eat it off the ground, Aunt Claire." A few people gasped, but their shock was drowned out by a different sound. Laughter. It started with my sister, Amanda, a sharp, delighted bark of a laugh. Then others joined in, a chorus of chuckles and snickers. But the loudest laugh, the one that cut right through my ribs and into my heart, belonged to my mother. I stood there with the silver cake knife still in my hand, the polished metal reflecting the string lights I'd hung myself that afternoon. I stared at their smiling faces, at the joy they found in my humiliation, and I wondered how love could sound so cruel. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I just walked away, their laughter chasing me off the deck and into the cool Colorado night. That was the moment my silence stopped meaning weakness. It was the moment it started to mean goodbye. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? To understand why a ruined cake could break a family, you have to understand my family. We were a photograph, not a home. On the surface, everything looked perfect. My father, Mark, was a quiet man who worked in finance and faded into the background. My mother, Linda, was the star of every show. She loved appearances more than people, and her happiness depended on how things looked to the neighbors. Her lawn had to be the greenest, her car the cleanest, and her daughters, well, one of her daughters had to be perfect. That daughter was Amanda. My older sister was my mother's reflection. Pretty, loud, charming, and always forgiven. She was the sun, and I was just a small, quiet planet orbiting her, useful only for reflecting her light. I was the placeholder in family photos, the one they told to scooch over to make more room for Amanda's new dress or perfect hair. I spent my life in the margins. Our childhood was a long lesson in favoritism. I remember when Amanda was 16, she wanted a brand new convertible for her birthday. It was bright red and completely impractical. My parents couldn't afford it, not really, but Mom took out a loan. She beamed as she handed Amanda the keys, saying, "Anything for my girl." The pictures from that day were all over the house for years. Amanda laughing, wind in her hair. Mom, looking at her with an adoration she never once directed at me. 2 years later, when I got accepted into college with a partial scholarship, I needed help with the rest of the tuition. I sat at the same kitchen table where they'd signed the car loan papers. I had my acceptance letter in my hand, my heart pounding with hope. Mom didn't even look up from her magazine. "You're the smart one, Claire," she said, flipping a page. "You'll figure it out. Besides, student loans build character. Character. That's what I was supposed to build while Amanda built a life of ease." Every family event followed the same script. At Christmas, Amanda would get designer bags and expensive electronics, while I'd get a sensible sweater or a gift card for groceries. Her birthdays were catered parties. Mine were a card with $20 inside if I was lucky. When she dropped out of college after one semester because it was too boring, my mother consoled her with a spa weekend. When I graduated with honors, my mother complained that the ceremony was too long and hot. Amanda was the story. I was the footnote. This dynamic followed us into adulthood. She floated from job to job, always quitting when things got hard, and my parents always had a safety net ready to catch her. I worked my way through school, taking double shifts as a waitress, my hands smelling like bleach and coffee grounds. I got a degree in accounting, landed a good job in Seattle, and built a stable life for myself. I was responsible. I was reliable, and my family saw that not as an accomplishment, but as a resource. My responsibility became their new safety net. They used my good credit like it was a public utility. It started small. "Claire, can you just co-sign on a new phone for me?" Amanda would ask. "My credit is a little messy right now." Then it was a credit card, then a car loan for her, after she wrecked the red convertible. The biggest one was the house. My parents wanted to refinance, but their debt was too high. My mother called me, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Honey, we just need your name on the papers to get a better interest rate. You know your dad and I are good for it. You're the responsible one. You're helping the family." I knew it was a bad idea. A voice in my head screamed at me not to do it. But the other voice, the one that had been trained for 25 years to seek their approval, whispered that maybe this time it would be different. Maybe this grand gesture of trust would finally earn me a seat at the table. So I signed my name on their mortgage, my name on Amanda's SUV. My generosity wasn't seen as a gift. It was a tool they used to build the life they wanted, while I paid for it, literally and emotionally. The graduation party was supposed to be my moment. I had just finished my master's degree, taking night classes for 2 years while working a full-time job. It was a huge achievement, one I was incredibly proud of. I flew back to Colorado because I still foolishly believed that this accomplishment was big enough, shiny enough, that they would finally have to see me. I planned the party myself. I bought the decorations, I cooked the food, I ordered the cake. I was creating my own celebration, hoping they would show up for it. It was my one night. I wanted just once to be the person they were proud of. Instead, that party became my final lesson. It was a brutal, clear-eyed education in the family I had, not the one I wished I had. In my family, kindness was a currency I kept spending on people who had no intention of ever paying me back. That night, I finally realized I had gone bankrupt. The backyard was staged for a happy memory. I had spent all afternoon hanging string lights from the big oak tree, their warm glow making the lawn look magical. The air smelled like barbecue and freshly cut grass. Friends of my parents and a few of my own old high school friends milled around, holding paper plates and red plastic cups. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was playing their part. It was a perfect illusion. I had been so nervous all day, a tight knot of hope and anxiety in my stomach. I wanted everything to be just right. I wanted them to look at the effort I made and feel something. Pride, maybe even love. When I brought the cake out, a simple sheet cake with "Congratulations, Claire," written in blue icing, a few people clapped. For a second, a tiny fragile second, I felt a flicker of joy. I thought, this is it. This is a good memory. I placed the cake on the center of the patio table. My mom started singing "For She's a Jolly Good Fellow," and everyone joined in, their voices a little off-key but cheerful enough. I blew out the candles, making a silent, desperate wish. Please, just let me feel like I belong here. Then it all fell apart. My nephew, Leo, Amanda's 10-year-old son, had been circling the table like a little shark. He was a miniature version of his mother, charming when he wanted to be, with a cruel streak he saved for easy targets. I was always an easy target. As I picked up the knife to make the first cut, he darted forward. "I want the corner piece with the most frosting," he yelled. "Okay, buddy, just let me cut it," I said with a gentle smile. He didn't wait. He put his hands on the edge of the cardboard cake platter and gave it a hard shove. It all happened in slow motion. The cake sliding, tipping, and then falling, landing face down on the wooden deck with a sickeningly soft thud. White frosting splattered on my shoes. Silence. For one long, stretched-out second, the whole party held its breath. Then came Leo's voice, clear and high-pitched in the sudden quiet. "Eat it off the ground, Aunt Claire." It wasn't a childish tantrum. It was a performance, and his audience loved it. The laughter that followed wasn't a reaction of surprise. It was a laugh of relief. Relief that the brief, uncomfortable moment of celebrating me was over. Relief that everything was back to normal, with me as the butt of the joke, the family punching bag, the one who never, ever fights back. My humiliation was the thing that made them feel comfortable again. I looked up from the ruined cake on the floor. My eyes found my sister's across the table. Amanda wasn't trying to hide it. She was smirking, a proud little smile on her face as she watched her son. He had learned this behavior from her. He was mimicking the 1,000 tiny cruelties she had dealt me over the years. Only he was doing it out loud, for everyone to see. She put a hand on his shoulder, a gesture not of correction but of approval. I scanned the crowd for my father. He stood by the grill, tongs in his hand, his face a perfect blank. He was looking down at the coals, pretending he hadn't heard, pretending he wasn't there. He had always been a master of avoidance. His silence was his contribution to my pain. It was his way of co-signing their cruelty without having to get his own hands dirty. And my mother, her head was thrown back, her laugh echoing louder than anyone else's. It was the sound of my heart breaking. She wasn't just laughing at a clumsy accident. She was laughing at me, at my hope, at my stupid, stubborn belief that I could ever be more to her than an afterthought. Something inside me shifted. The constant ache of trying, of wanting, of needing them to love me just stopped. It was like a switch being flipped off. The noise of the party faded into a dull buzz. I was standing in the middle of it all, but I wasn't there anymore. I placed the cake knife down on the table, very gently. My hands didn't even shake. I reached behind my back and untied the strings of the frilly apron I'd worn to protect my dress. I folded it neatly and set it next to the knife. Then, without a word, I turned and walked away. I walked past the smiling faces, off the deck, across the perfectly green lawn, and through the side gate. I didn't run. I walked with a strange, calm certainty. Each step felt heavy and light at the same time. Heavy with the weight of a lifetime of disappointment, and light with the freedom of finally letting it go. I expected someone to call my name. Claire, wait! Or where are you going? But no one followed. No one called out. The only sound was their fading laughter. That silence was the loudest, most honest answer they had ever given me. It said, "We don't need you." It said, "You don't matter." And for the first time in my life, I heard what they were really saying. I didn't belong to them anymore. Maybe I never had. I didn't go far. I walked to the end of the block and sat on a bench at the deserted neighborhood park. The moon was bright, and the air was cool against my hot cheeks. I didn't cry. I felt strangely empty, hollowed out. The part of me that had spent a lifetime craving their approval felt like it had been surgically removed. There was no pain, just a clean, quiet void. I sat there for hours, watching cars pass, their headlights cutting through the darkness. I didn't have my purse or my keys. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't look at it. I didn't want to see a fake, frantic text asking where I was. I just wanted to be alone with this newfound silence. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. And then it buzzed again and again. I finally pulled it out of my pocket. The screen's glare unnaturally bright in the dark. There were 3 messages. The first was from my mother. It read, "Your behavior tonight was embarrassing and completely unacceptable. You ruined your own party. We have decided it's best for everyone if we sever all contact. Stay away forever. Stay away forever." The words were so cold, so final. There was no question, no discussion, just a verdict. She had cast me out for walking away from my own public shaming. The message wasn't about my feelings. It was about my disobedience. I had broken the unspoken rule. I was supposed to stand there and take it. By walking away, I had ruined their fun. The second message was from Amanda. It was just a single emoji, a red heart. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. The cruelty of that heart was breathtaking. It was a celebration. It was her victory lap. She had finally gotten what she always wanted, to be the only daughter. The heart emoji wasn't a message of love. It was a punctuation mark on my mother's sentence. It was a little digital signature at the bottom of my exile. The third message was from my dad. It simply said, "Listen to your mother, Claire." That was it. That was his contribution. A coward's text. Outsourcing his authority and his responsibility. He wouldn't stand up to them and he wouldn't stand up for me. He just stood aside, as always. I read the 3 messages over and over again. But the strange thing was, the pain I expected to feel never came. The shock had burned it all away. What rose up in its place was a cold, hard clarity. They weren't just ending our relationship. They were confirming that there was never a real one to begin with. And in that clarity, I remembered everything. I thought about the house. Their house, the one I was sitting just a few blocks away from, with its perfectly manicured lawn and its warm, glowing windows. The house where they had just decided to cut me out of their lives forever. My name was on that mortgage. I had co-signed the refinancing agreement 2 years ago because my mother had cried on the phone, telling me they would lose everything without my help. "It's just a formality, sweetie," she'd said. "You just helped sign." I thought about Amanda's shiny black SUV parked in their driveway. My name was on that loan too. She'd needed a reliable car for Leo, she'd said. Her credit was shot from years of irresponsible spending. I was the only one who could get her approved. "I'll make every payment, I swear," she had promised. I later found out she was consistently late, and the delinquency notices were hitting my credit score. 3 years. For 3 years, I had been paying for their lives in more ways than one. I paid off their credit card debt twice. I co-signed loans they had no intention of managing responsibly. I had allowed them to turn my hard-earned stability and my generosity into chains. They had wrapped me in financial obligations so tightly that they thought I could never leave. They saw my signature not as a favor, but as a leash. "Stay away forever," my mother's text said. Okay. Sitting there on that park bench in the dark, I made a decision. They wanted me gone? Fine. But they weren't taking my future with them. They thought they were cutting me off, but they had it all backward. They had given me the one thing I never had before, permission to leave, so I decided to cut every one of those chains. Not with anger or revenge, but with the same quiet efficiency I applied to my job. I would do it quietly. I would do it legally. And I would do it permanently. I stood up from the bench, my legs stiff. I started the long walk back to their house. I wasn't going back to fight or to beg. I was going back to get my things. My escape had already begun. The next morning, I was on the first flight back to Seattle. I didn't sleep on the plane. I spent the entire 2 hours organizing. I went through my emails, my banking apps, and my digital files, pulling up every document that tied me to my family. The signed loan agreements, the mortgage papers, the text messages where my mother and sister acknowledged my role. "Thanks for helping with the car, Claire. You're a lifesaver." The bank approved the new mortgage. Couldn't have done it without you. I even had emails from the bank loan officers addressed to me, with my parents and sister copied, outlining my liabilities as the primary cosigner. I saved everything to a secure folder. By the time the plane landed, I had a complete, damning file detailing my financial entanglement. They thought I was just the emotional doormat. They had forgotten that I was also a damn good accountant. Instead of going home from the airport, I took a taxi straight to the downtown branch of Green First Bank, the institution that held both the mortgage and Amanda's car loan. I walked in wearing the same dress from the party, now rumpled from a sleepless night. I probably looked like a mess, but I had never felt more put together in my life. I asked to speak with the branch manager. A kind-faced man in his 50s named Mr. Diaz led me into his glass-walled office. "How can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice gentle. I didn't break down. I didn't get emotional. I simply opened my laptop, turned it to face him, and said, "I need to begin the process of liability release for 2 accounts on which I am the primary co-signer. I believe I have been a victim of financial coercion." I laid it all out for him. I showed him the documents, the text messages, the payment history that showed I had personally made several late payments on their behalf to protect my own credit score. I explained the situation calmly and factually, just as I would present a financial report at work. I told him about the events of the party and showed him the messages from my family, severing all contact. "They have ordered me to stay away forever," I said, my voice steady. "I intend to honor that request in every possible way, starting with my finances." Mr. Diaz listened patiently, his expression shifting from professional politeness to deep concern. He scrolled through the files, his brow furrowed. He read the text messages twice. When he was done, he looked up at me, his eyes full of a sympathy I hadn't seen from my own father in 20 years. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice firm, "what you're describing is a serious form of financial abuse. You were manipulated into securing loans for family members who have now abandoned their responsibilities and their relationship with you. Based on these documents and their written declaration to sever ties, we have grounds to proceed." The click of his pen as he pulled out a stack of forms sounded like a key turning in a lock. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. He explained the process. It was called a release of liability. It wasn't simple, but it was possible. It would require the primary borrowers, my parents and Amanda, to refinance the loans solely in their own names. Given their poor credit and financial habits, this would be nearly impossible for them. If they failed to do so within a set period, the bank would be forced to take action. The loans would go into default, and the assets, the house and the car, would be subject to foreclosure and repossession. "This will have severe financial consequences for them," Mr. Diaz warned me gently. "Are you prepared for that?" I looked at my mother's text message on my phone one last time. "Stay away forever." "They made their choice," I said, my voice clear and certain. "I'm making mine. I am choosing to protect myself." He nodded, a small, respectful smile on his face. Sometimes protecting yourself is the only way to teach others respect. I spent the next hour signing papers. Every signature felt like I was shedding a layer of dead weight. I signed to remove my name. I signed to authorize the bank to contact them. I signed to affirm that I would no longer be financially responsible for them in any capacity. Each stroke of the pen was another door closing, another chain breaking. When the final page was stamped and notarized, Mr. Diaz stood up and shook my hand. "It's done, Miss Morgan. The process has been initiated. You will be notified once the release is complete." I walked out of that bank and into the bright Seattle sunshine. For the first time, the wind didn't feel like it was pushing against me. It felt like it was at my back. I took a deep breath, and the air in my lungs felt lighter. It felt clean. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed them anymore. Freedom wasn't something I had to ask for. I was taking it. The price was a family I never really had, and it was a price I was finally willing to pay. The flight back to Seattle was a strange bubble of calm before the storm. I knew what was coming. The bank would send the notifications, and the world I had just disconnected from would erupt. When I unlocked the door to my small, quiet apartment, the silence felt like a sanctuary. It was the only place on earth where I wasn't an afterthought, where I didn't have to fight for space to breathe. I dropped my overnight bag, took a long, hot shower, and washed the grime of my old life off my skin. I put on my most comfortable pajamas, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat on my couch, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. Just after noon, my phone, which I had placed face down on the coffee table, began to vibrate. The persistent, angry buzzing sounded like a trapped wasp. I picked it up. The screen read, "Mom." I took a sip of my tea, the warm ceramic mug steady in my hands. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I needed a moment to prepare myself. A few seconds later, A text message notification lit up the screen. Then another and another. Before I could read them, the phone started ringing again. This time it was Amanda. I ignored that call too. Then, a call from my dad. The phone fell silent for a minute. I felt a small, foolish flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they would stop. Maybe they would understand. But then the voicemail notifications started popping up. 3 of them. I knew I had to listen. I had to know what I was truly up against. I pressed play on my mother's. Her voice, shrill and laced with a venomous rage I knew all too well, filled my quiet apartment. Claire Elizabeth Morgan, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but you need to call the bank and fix this right now. They're saying we have 30 days to refinance the house. On what planet do you think that's possible? You have ruined us! After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By trying to make us homeless? You are a selfish, ungrateful child, and you will regret this for the rest of your life. There it was. Not a single question about why I might have done this. Not a moment of self-reflection. Just accusations, blame, the classic family script. I hadn't ruined them. I had simply stopped being their pillar. They weren't angry that I was hurt. They were furious that I was no longer useful. Next, I listened to Amanda's. She was crying, but they were tears of fury, not sorrow. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? Sitting up there in your fancy Seattle apartment while we're down here dealing with a real crisis. The bank called, Claire. They're going to take my SUV. How am I supposed to get Leo to school? To his soccer practice? Did you even think about your nephew for 1 second before you pulled this disgusting stunt? You're destroying this family all because you had a little tantrum over a stupid cake. A cake? A stupid cake. She still didn't get it. It was never about the cake. It was about the laughter. It was about her proud smirk. It was about a lifetime of being treated like I was worth less than the dirt on their shoes. Her voice cracked with entitlement, the sound of someone who had never once had to face the consequences of her own actions. Finally, my father's message. His voice was low and strained, the familiar sound of a man trying to stay out of the line of fire. Claire. Honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your mother is very upset. We're all very upset. This isn't the way to handle things. Just call the bank. We can talk about this. Please, just fix it. Don't do this to your mother. Don't do this to your mother. Not, are you okay? Not, let's talk about what happened. Just, appease your mother. Go back to your role. Keep the peace. Even now, his only concern was managing her emotions, not acknowledging my pain. My phone started ringing again. My mother. I stared at her name, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, no desperate need to answer and make things right. The emotional hooks they had embedded in me for 27 years had been pulled clean. My calm was my new weapon. Over the next few hours, my phone was a constant barrage. Texts flooded in, a stream of consciousness filled with rage, manipulation, and misspelled words. From Amanda, Leo is crying, asking why his aunt is taking his mom's car away. I hope you're happy. From Mom, the neighbors are going to see foreclosure signs on our lawn. I will never forgive you for this public humiliation. From Amanda, Dad had to take a pill for his heart. This stress is going to kill him and it will be your fault. Not one message said, I'm sorry. Not one message said, we miss you. Not one message said, can we talk about why you're hurting? It was all about them, their credit, their house, their car, their reputation. They weren't mourning the loss of a daughter or a sister. They were furious about the loss of their primary asset. Late in the afternoon, I received a professional, courteous email from Mr. Diaz at the bank. He was informing me that, as per procedure, notices had been officially mailed to the primary borrowers. He also mentioned that he had received several distressed phone calls, but had calmly reiterated the bank's position and the terms of the loans. He ended the email with, please continue to prioritize your own well-being, Miss Morgan. We will handle the procedural side of things. Reading his calm, respectful words was like a breath of fresh air after drowning in their toxic vitriol. He, a complete stranger, showed me more concern and decency in one email than my family had shown me in my entire life. That evening, I ate a simple dinner of soup and toast at my kitchen table, my phone silent on the counter. The constant buzzing had finally stopped. They had exhausted their anger for the day. As I washed my bowl in the sink, I thought about what to do next. I couldn't live like this, waiting for the next attack. I couldn't leave the door open for them to keep throwing their poison at me. They had told me to stay away forever. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the dozens of missed calls and hateful messages. I didn't reread them. I didn't need to. I knew what they said. I opened a new text message, addressed to all 3 of them in a group chat. My fingers were perfectly steady as I typed out one final sentence. I thought about making it about the money, about the loans, about the law, but I knew that wouldn't get through to them. I had to speak to the heart of the matter. I had to make them remember the moment they broke me. I typed, "I stopped paying for people who laughed when my cake hit the floor." I hit send. I watched the little delivered notification pop up beneath the message. I knew it would be the last thing they ever received from me. Then I opened my contacts. I found Mom first. I tapped on her name and scrolled down. My thumb hovered over the option for a moment. Block this caller. I pressed it. A small pop-up asked me to confirm. You will not receive phone calls, messages, or FaceTime from this contact. I pressed block contact. Her name vanished from my call log. Next, Amanda. I did the same. Block, confirm. She was gone. Finally, Dad. This one caused a brief, sharp pang in my chest. He was weak, yes, but he had never been actively cruel. But his weakness was a weapon they used. His silence was his consent. He was a part of the system that enabled my abuse. I pressed the button. Block. Confirm. He was gone, too. I went through my social media and blocked them there as well. I blocked my nephew. I blocked a few aunts and uncles who I knew would only serve as their messengers. I methodically, digitally, and completely excised them from my life. It was a quiet, bloodless amputation. It had to be done to stop the sickness from spreading. When I was finished, my phone was silent. The chaos wasn't my problem anymore. I had walked out of the burning house and closed the door behind me. I couldn't save them from the fire they had set, but I could, finally, save myself. The first few days of total silence were both peaceful and deeply unsettling. I had never known a life without the constant, low-grade hum of my family's drama in the background. The quiet in my apartment was absolute. No angry texts lighting up my screen. No pleading voicemails. No expectation that I had to be on call to solve a crisis of their making. I went to work. I paid my bills. I bought groceries. I was just living. It was so normal. It felt radical. But the peace was fragile. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment, my heart would leap into my throat. Every time a car door slammed on the street below, I'd flinch. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew them. They would not let go this easily. Their sense of ownership over me was too deeply ingrained. Blocking their calls was a challenge, not a conclusion. The shoe dropped on a rainy Thursday afternoon, 3 days after I had sent my final text. I was working from home, sitting at my small desk with a spreadsheet open on my laptop, a half-empty mug of coffee beside me. The only sound was the gentle patter of rain against the window pane. Then another sound shattered the quiet. Bang, bang, bang. It wasn't a knock. It was a pounding. Loud, angry, and insistent. It came from my front door, echoing through my small apartment. It was the sound of someone who believed they had a right to be let in. My blood ran cold. I froze, my hands hovering over my keyboard. Bang, 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 bang. Claire, open this door. We know you're in there. Open up right now. My mother's voice, sharp and muffled through the thick wood of the door, but unmistakable. Then another voice joined hers, higher pitched and frantic. Claire, this is insane. You can't just ignore us. We need to talk. Amanda, they were here. They had flown 2 states, from Colorado to Washington, to confront me. The sheer obsessive audacity of it took my breath away. They hadn't come to apologize. They had come to demand, to reclaim what they saw as their property. My first instinct was pure animal fear. I backed my chair away from my desk, my heart hammering against my ribs. A part of me, the old me, the conditioned me, felt a surge of guilt. They were my family. They were standing in the rain. Maybe I should just open the door. Maybe I could make them understand. Then the image of the cake, smashed and smeared on the deck, flashed in my mind. I heard their laughter. I saw Amanda's smirk and my mother's gleeful expression. I remembered the cold finality of their text messages. Stay away forever. They had drawn the battle line, not me. My fear slowly hardened into something else. Resolve. This was my home, my sanctuary. They were not welcome here. The intercom buzzer shrieked, making me jump. I walked over to the small wall-mounted unit and pressed the talk button, my hand shaking slightly. What do you want? My voice was steadier than I expected. What do we want? My mother screeched, her voice distorted by the cheap speaker. We want you to let us in, you ungrateful girl. We need to sort this mess out. There's nothing to sort out, I said, keeping my voice level. You told me to stay away. I'm staying away. Please leave. Don't you dare hang up on me, Amanda yelled. We are not leaving until you talk to us. Open the door. The pounding started again, harder this time, rattling the door in its frame. They were causing a scene. My neighbors could hear. This was their strategy. Public humiliation. They were trying to shame me into surrendering, but I wasn't that person anymore. I was not a participant in their drama. I was an accountant. I was a responsible adult, and responsible adults handle intruders in a logical, procedural way. I took a deep breath, walked back to my kitchen counter, and picked up my cell phone. My fingers were trembling now, but my purpose was clear. I dialed 3 numbers. 101 to 1, a calm, professional voice answered. 911, what is your emergency? I took another breath to steady myself. Hello, I have 2 people outside my apartment door. They are pounding on it and yelling. They are refusing to leave the premises. Okay, ma'am. What is your address? I gave her my address and apartment number. Do you know these individuals? The dispatcher asked. I paused. The answer to this question felt immensely important. It was a moment of redefinition. Yes, I know them, I said, my voice quiet but firm. They're my family, but today they're trespassers. Saying the words out loud made them real. It was the final official severing. They were no longer defined by our shared blood, but by their current actions. They were intruders. Okay, ma'am. We have a unit on the way. Is the door locked? Yes, it's locked. Do not open the door for any reason. The officers will be there in a few minutes. I hung up the phone and walked to my door, my heart still pounding, but with adrenaline now, not fear. I looked through the peephole. The distorted fisheye view showed my mother and sister, their faces red and twisted with rage, their hair wet from the rain. They looked wild. They looked like strangers. I watched them, unseen, until I heard the heavy tread of boots coming down the hallway. A few moments later, 2 police officers appeared in my peephole's view. They were calm, solid, and professional. Ma'am? Miss? One of the officers said, his voice a deep, authoritative rumble. We've had a complaint about a disturbance. Is there a problem here? My mother immediately launched into her performance. Oh, thank God, officers. This is a misunderstanding. Our daughter, Claire, she lives here. She's not well. She's locked herself in and won't talk to us. We're just worried about her. The lies were so easy for her, so smooth. We're her family. Amanda chimed in, trying to sound reasonable. We just want to make sure she's okay. The officer did not look convinced. He knocked on my door. A firm but polite rap. Ma'am, this is the Seattle PD. Could you open the door for me, please? I took a breath and unlocked the deadbolt, opening the door just a few inches, keeping the chain lock engaged. I looked past the officer to my mother and sister, whose faces fell when they saw my calm expression. They had expected me to be hysterical, broken. They didn't know what to do with my composure. I'm Claire Morgan, I said to the officer. I'm the resident here. I'm the one who called. Are you all right, ma'am? He asked, his eyes scanning my face for any sign of distress. I am perfectly fine, thank you, officer, I said. These 2 individuals were causing a disturbance and refusing to leave my private property. I want them to go. My mother gasped, clutching her chest in a theatrical display of hurt. She's my daughter. I have rights. The officer turned to her, his expression unreadable but his voice leaving no room for argument. Not here, ma'am. Not without permission from the resident. This is her apartment. If she's asking you to leave, you have to leave. If you don't, it's considered trespassing. The word hung in the air between us. Trespassing. The official legal term for what they were. Amanda's face contorted with rage. You're calling the cops on your own family. What is wrong with you? You need to come with us, ladies, the second officer said, stepping forward. Watching them being escorted down the hallway under the flat, fluorescent lights was a surreal experience. My mother was still arguing, her voice shrill and indignant. Amanda was silently fuming, shooting me a look of pure hatred over her shoulder. They didn't look powerful anymore. They looked pathetic. They looked like 2 bullies who had finally tried to push someone who wouldn't fall over. I closed my door, slid the deadbolt back into place, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The silence that filled my apartment now was different. It was solid. It was safe. It was earned. In that moment, a profound realization washed over me. So clear and so powerful, it felt like a physical wave. I hadn't lost a family. A family is a place of safety, of love, of mutual respect. What I had was a cage, and I hadn't lost it. I had escaped one. Having the police escort your mother and sister from your apartment building is not something you recover from quickly. For the rest of the week, I felt on edge, jumpy. I double-checked the locks on my door at night. I screened my calls from unknown numbers. I knew they wouldn't try to approach me physically again. The threat of a trespassing charge was real, but I also knew they wouldn't just give up. Their need for control was a living, breathing thing, and when one avenue was cut off, it would always find another. The next attack came from where I should have expected it, the court of public opinion. It was a Saturday morning. I was trying to have a normal weekend, to wash away the stress of the past week. I had bought myself fresh flowers and was drinking coffee while listening to a podcast. It was almost peaceful. Then, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend from high school. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, Claire, I don't know what's going on, but I saw your mom's post and I'm just, Checking if you're okay? My stomach clenched. I knew instantly what had happened. I thanked her for checking in, then reluctantly opened my Facebook app. I didn't even have to search for it. My mother had tagged me in the post, ensuring it would appear in my notifications. It was a long, rambling block of text underneath a smiling, perfectly curated photo of her and my dad from years ago. The post began with a flourish of manipulative sentimentality. It is with the heaviest of hearts that my husband and I are sharing a painful family matter. We have always believed in privacy, but the actions of our daughter, Claire, have forced our hand. My hand started to shake as I read on. The lies were staggering in their audacity. As some of you know, we have always done everything for our children. We have sacrificed to give them the best life possible. But sometimes that love is not returned. Recently, our daughter, Claire, for reasons we cannot comprehend, decided to betray us in the most painful way imaginable. She used her position of trust to access our finances, and without any warning, she deliberately defaulted on our family home and car, effectively stealing from us and ruining our credit. We are now in danger of losing everything we have worked our entire lives for. It was a work of art, a masterpiece of victimhood. She had twisted the narrative so completely that I was no longer the co-signer she had manipulated, but a financial predator who had attacked her out of the blue. She wasn't done. Her cruelty didn't stop there. When we flew to Seattle, worried sick about her mental state, she refused to see us and called the police on her own family. We were treated like criminals by the very child we raised. We don't know this person she has become. We are heartbroken and ask for your prayers for Claire, who is clearly going through a dark and troubling time. The post ended with a final, devastating blow. We just pray that she finds her way back to the loving family that is waiting for her once she decides to stop this hurtful and destructive behavior. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was a public execution. She had painted me as a thief, as mentally unstable, and as a cruel, unloving daughter, and people were believing it. The comment section was a firestorm of misplaced sympathy and condemnation. Linda, I am so sorry you're going through this. You are a saint and have always been a wonderful mother, wrote a neighbor. This is shocking. I can't believe it. Sending you both so much love and strength, commented one of my aunts. A cousin chimed in. I always had a feeling there was something cold about Claire. This is just awful. Dozens of comments, all of them variations on the same theme. My mother was the martyr, and I was the villain. Friends, family, neighbors, people I had known my entire life were publicly crucifying me based on a single one-sided story. They didn't ask questions. They didn't seek my side. They just piled on, eager to be part of the drama, to show their allegiance. My first impulse was to fight back. My fingers flew over my keyboard, my mind racing. I would write my own post. I would refute every single lie, point by point. I would post screenshots of her manipulative text messages, of Amanda's entitled demands. I would share the bank documents. I would show them the truth. I would expose her for the narcissist she was. My post was half written, a furious defensive tirade, when I stopped. My finger hovered over the post button. What would happen if I hit it? I imagined the ensuing chaos. The online war, people taking sides, my family members doubling down on their attacks, strangers weighing in on my most private pain. It would become a spectacle. And that's exactly what my mother wanted. She thrives on chaos. She feeds on drama. A public fight would give her exactly the attention she craved. It would be her stage, and I would just be another actor in her play. Arguing with her would mean I was still engaged, still hooked, still letting her control my emotions. I would be playing her game, and I was done playing her game. Slowly, deliberately, I deleted the entire post I had drafted. I watched the angry words disappear from my screen. I took a deep, shaky breath and closed the Facebook app. I would not engage. I would not defend myself. I would not give her the satisfaction of a fight. My new life was about peace. My new strength was silence, but I was also practical. I knew these lies could have real-world consequences. I had a career, a reputation to protect. I couldn't let her poison my professional life, so I opened my work email. I drafted a short, simple, and professional message to my direct boss and the head of HR subject, personal matter, dear, boss's name, and HR manager's name. I am writing to you preemptively about a private family issue. There is a possibility that you may see some false and damaging rumors about me circulating on social media, posted by estranged family members. I want to assure you that these claims are untrue. I have taken legal and financial steps to establish firm boundaries, and unfortunately, some people fight those boundaries with lies. I do not intend to engage with it publicly, as I believe it is unprofessional and unproductive. I wanted to make you aware in case it should cross your path. My commitment to my work here is unwavering, and this personal matter will not affect my performance. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, Claire Morgan. It was calm, controlled, and professional. It didn't give messy details. It simply stated the situation, framed it as a response to boundary setting, and reassured them of my professionalism. I hit send. The response from my boss came less than 10 minutes later. Thank you for the heads up, Claire. We trust you. Don't give it another thought. Let me know if you need anything. I felt a wave of relief so intense it almost brought me to tears. This was what respect felt like. This was what it was like to be trusted, to be judged on your own merits and character, not on the accusations of others. I went back to my day. I watered my new flowers. I finished my coffee. I put the podcast back on. I refused to look at Facebook again. Let them talk. Let them gossip and speculate. Let them have their firestorm. I wasn't going to pour any more fuel on it. My energy was a precious resource, and I would no longer be wasting it on them. I had come to a powerful realization. The truth doesn't need a roaring defense. It doesn't need an audience or a cheering section. It's quiet. It's steady. It just needs time to work. My character, the one I had built through my actions, my work ethic, and my quiet reliability, would speak for itself. Their lies were loud and frantic, but lies are hollow. They burn bright and fast, but eventually, they just burn out. The week after the Facebook firestorm was a lesson in restraint. Every instinct screamed at me to check the post, to see what new lies were being spun. Who else had joined the chorus against me? But I didn't. I kept the app off my phone. When well-meaning friends tried to give me updates, I would politely cut them off. Thank you for caring, I'd say. But I'm choosing not to participate in that conversation. My life became an island of determined calm in the middle of a hurricane I could sense raging just over the horizon. I focused on my work. I went for long walks in the Seattle mist. I read books. I was building a new foundation for my life, one that was not dependent on anyone else's opinion or approval. But there was still one piece missing. I was living in a state of administrative limbo, waiting for the final, official word that the chains had truly been broken. I was free in spirit, but I needed the proof on paper. It arrived on a Tuesday, exactly 30 days after my visit to Mr. Diaz. It came in the regular mail, tucked between a credit card offer and a coupon booklet for a local pizza place. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope made of heavy cardstock. In the top left corner, the return address was elegantly printed, Green First Bank, Corporate Legal Department. My heart started to beat a little faster. I carried the envelope into my apartment and set it on the kitchen table, looking at it as if it were a strange, sleeping animal. This was it. This envelope contained the final verdict on the last 10 years of my life. It would either be a declaration of my independence, or a summons back into a legal battle I didn't have the emotional energy to fight. My hands were surprisingly steady as I slid a butter knife under the flap and sliced it open. I pulled out a single folded sheet of paper, even heavier and more formal than the envelope. At the top of the page was the bank's official letterhead. I unfolded it. The document was dense with legal terminology, phrases like heretofore, indemnification, and cessation of obligation. I scanned through the paragraphs, my eyes searching for the one thing that mattered, and then I saw it. A short, simple paragraph near the bottom. This letter serves as official and permanent confirmation that as of this date, Claire Elizabeth Morgan has been granted a full and irrevocable liability release, confirmation in connection with mortgage account 78451 and auto loan account 91123. All financial and legal obligations pertaining to these accounts have been terminated. Her name is officially detached from all associated loans, titles, and liens. Below the paragraph was a line for a signature, the bank's legal counsel, and next to it, embossed into the paper, was a shimmering, intricate golden seal. It caught the light from my kitchen window, a small, brilliant sun on a page of black ink. I read the paragraph again, and again, full and irrevocable, permanently released, all obligations terminated. I sank into a kitchen chair, the letter held tight in my hands. I hadn't realized how much tension I had been carrying in my body, a constant, low-level clenching in my shoulders, my jaw, my stomach. And now, it was all just letting go. A wave of relief so profound and so complete washed over me. It was a physical sensation, like a heavy weight I had been carrying for years had been lifted from my back. Quiet tears started to well in my eyes and spill down my cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of release. The fight was over. I had won. But it didn't feel like a triumphant fist-pumping victory. It was a quiet, solemn, deeply personal justice. The golden seal on the paper wasn't just a corporate stamp. It was a symbol of my new life. It was a passport to peace. I held that piece of paper like it was the most precious thing I owned. It was more than a legal document. It was proof. It was validation. It was the official record of my escape. That evening, out of a strange sense of curiosity, the kind you have when you want to look back at a wreckage from a safe distance, I re-downloaded the Facebook app. I searched for my mother's page. I scrolled down to where the infamous post had been. It was gone. Vanished. There was no explanation, no retraction, no follow-up post. Just a gaping hole where the firestorm had been. The post from the day before was about her garden. The post after was a shared recipe for lemon meringue pie. It was as if the entire vicious campaign against me had never happened. I knew exactly what had happened. The 30-day deadline had passed. The bank had officially notified them that because they had failed to refinance, the foreclosure and repossession processes were now beginning in earnest. Their public narrative that I had stolen from them had crumbled. The official bank letters they had received would have made it clear that this was a consequence of a legal process they could not fight. Their lies had hit a wall of hard legal reality. Leaving the post up would only expose them as frauds. So, in typical fashion, they simply erased it. They swept it under the rug, pretending it never happened, hoping everyone else would forget too. There was no apology. There was no message to me, just silence. And that silence was more satisfying than any apology could ever be. An apology from them would have been just another manipulation, another attempt to pull me back in. But this silence, this was an admission of defeat. Their power over me was gone, and they knew it. Their financial leverage was gone. Their ability to create public drama had been neutralized by my refusal to participate. They had no moves left to make. Freedom, I realized, wasn't a loud declaration. It wasn't a triumphant party with confetti and champagne. It was quiet. It was the absence of their voices in my head. It was the stillness in my apartment. It was the gentle hum of the refrigerator in a home that was completely, legally, and spiritually my own. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. Months passed. The autumn rains of Seattle gave way to the gray quiet of winter, which eventually surrendered to the tentative green of spring. My life, once a tangled mess of other people's needs and dramas, slowly straightened out into a simple, peaceful pattern of my own making. I found that my newfound quietness translated into a new kind of confidence at work. Without the constant background noise of my family's crises, my mind was clearer. I was more focused, more decisive. One afternoon, my boss called me into his office. I felt a familiar, fleeting pang of anxiety, the old reflex of being summoned for a reprimand, but his expression was warm. "Claire," he said, leaning forward on his desk, "I just wanted to tell you that you've been doing exceptional work lately. The new quarterly projections you ran were flawless. People on the team trust your steadiness. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I walked out of his office with a small, genuine smile on my face. Steadiness. For my entire life, my family had called me too quiet, too sensitive, boring. They saw my calm nature as a weakness, a void to be filled with their noise. But here, in a life I had built for myself, my quiet nature was seen as a strength. My steadiness was a virtue. I was being valued for who I was, not for what I could provide. The empty spaces in my life that family used to occupy began to fill up with better things. I made friends, real friends. We'd meet for coffee on Saturday mornings or go for hikes in the mountains on Sundays. The conversations were easy, balanced. I would listen to their problems and they would listen to mine. There was no agenda, no manipulation. It was just companionship. The laughter we shared was light and genuine, a world away from the cruel, mocking laughter that had haunted me for so long. One sunny afternoon in May, I took two things to a local frame shop. The first was my master's diploma, which had been sitting in a cardboard tube in my closet for nearly a year. The second was the liability release confirmation from the bank, the one with the golden seal. I had them mounted in identical simple black frames. When I got home, I hung them side by side on the wall next to my desk. They looked like a matched set, two pieces of proof. One said, "I earned my future." The other said, "I protected it." They were my twin declarations of independence. A year to the day after the disastrous graduation party, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it. "Hey Claire, it's Amanda. I got your number from cousin Sarah. Listen, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. For the cake. For what Mom did. For all of it. I was a real jerk." I stared at the message for a long time. A year ago, these words would have been everything I had ever wanted to hear. I would have wept with relief. I would have called her immediately, ready to forgive, ready to rebuild, ready to fall right back into the old patterns. But I wasn't that person anymore. I read the words again. "I'm sorry. They were just words on a screen." They couldn't erase a lifetime of cruelty. They couldn't magically heal the deep foundational wounds. An apology is not a time machine. It doesn't undo the damage. It is simply an acknowledgement of it. And while I appreciated the acknowledgement, I knew it didn't come with a guarantee of changed behavior. It was an opening, an invitation to let her back into my life. I thought about what opening that door would mean. It would mean more chances for disappointment. It would mean policing boundaries. It would mean wondering if the change was real or temporary. It would mean letting the noise back in when I had worked so hard for the quiet. I realized forgiveness didn't have to be a reunion. It didn't require a conversation. It could be a quiet, private act. I could forgive her for my own sake, to release the last vestiges of bitterness in my heart, without ever having to speak to her again. I could wish her well from a great and permanent distance. I did not reply. I put my phone down and looked at the 2 frames hanging on my wall. I had my proof. I had my peace. I didn't need anything else. Forgiveness doesn't always mean opening the door you worked so hard to close. Sometimes the most powerful and peaceful form of forgiveness is closing that door softly, locking it for good, and simply walking away. If you've ever had to choose your own peace over the people who were supposed to be your peace, know that you are not weak. You are not selfish. You are a survivor. You are not alone. Tell me where you're watching from, and remember, your silence, your boundaries, your peace, that is your strength.